What's up, guys? It's now time for a mid-season review on the Seattle Seahawks, and a lot of it is not good. A lot of it is not good. But that being said, let's start with the positives. The defensive unit looks pretty solid. Going into the Dallas Cowboys game, the Seattle Seahawks actually had the 5th best defense in the NFC, and that's up with a lot of tough opponents. And so I got to give credit to the defense. They have kept us in the majority of the games we've played. With the exception of the Pittsburgh game, we've been in pretty much every single game. San Francisco, obviously our 2 wins against Arizona and the New York Giants. The Atlanta game, the defense had a good first half, but ultimately gave us an opportunity to win. Cleveland, Dallas. And you can honestly make a case for the Cincinnati game. I know that game right now is kind of looked at the borderline with the defense having a good or bad day, but at one point, in my view, it was a one-possession game. The score was something along the lines of 20-12, which is a one-possession game, a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, and that was midway through the second half. So, for the most part, the defense actually looks pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. Our special teams, they've looked good at times. They've looked bad at times. I mean, we had 2 kickoff returns. We gave up 2 kickoff returns to San Francisco in the first game of the season. And then in some cases they look great, blocking 2 field goals against Cleveland. So obviously that's pretty good. So overall, the special teams they haven't been great, but they haven't been horrible. They've been good. They've been good. Now let's talk about the offense. If there's one thing that Seattle Seahawks fans have learned throughout this season, is it doesn't matter if Tavares Jackson or Charlie Whitehurst is at the helm of the quarterback position. The offensive line, the offensive unit stinks with both of them, and they both stink as quarterbacks. I know I've harped on Charlie Whitehurst before. That's honestly been my most successful video up here ever since I did my vlog. But the 2 guys do not look good. I mean, take your pick. They both have ups and downs. Yes, Tavares has had more success than Charlie, but the vibe that I'm getting, and the vibe that I actually agree with, is Tavares is not the answer at quarterback. And the thing that really stinks about there's a positive with Tavares and Whitehurst, is they're not being paid a lot of money, and they are not going to be here for a very long time. But it does stink being in the now, as in this is who we have, and these are the options we have at quarterback. I mean, heck, even our 3rd-string quarterback, Josh Portis, was inactive yesterday against the Dallas Cowboys. So it's either Whitehurst or Jackson. I mean, take your pick of the litter. There's nothing we can do about it. They're not the quarterback of the long term. ESPN Seattle and KJR like to use the term they're Band-Aids just for the time being, because Pete Carroll has said he wants to improve the offensive line and the rest of the offensive unit before they go out and get a quarterback. Because if everything else stinks around them, then there's no point to having a franchise quarterback as of right now, which I can kind of agree with, but at the same time, it's painful to watch. It's very painful to watch. Jackson second guesses himself all the time. He takes forever to throw unless it's in the no huddle. Charlie Whitehurst has not been accurate at all. In fact, when he had his opportunity against the Cleveland Browns, a lot of people were complaining that he threw on the wrong side to Sidney Rice when he actually got the Seahawks into the red zone for the only time in the game. He looked terrible. The quarterback position, it's not good. And it's going to be very hard to watch these 2 play at quarterback for the rest of the season. It really is. Good thing is, though, is they're not going to pay a lot of money, and they're the short-term plan. Charlie Whitehurst is in the 2nd year of his 2-year contract. Tavares is in his first of a 2-year contract. So it's just something that Seahawks fans, including myself, are going to have to deal with. But honestly, they both don't look like that's the answer. Now let's go to positive next. The wide receivers actually do look pretty good. When they get an opportunity to make plays, they have been making plays. Doug Baldwin has come out and had a fantastic year. Ben Obamano has had a couple of big games. Mike Williams, I know, has been pretty quiet, but that's partly because he's either been hurt or Tavares and Charlie are not throwing to him. Sidney Rice has had a couple of big games, although he's been a little quiet lately. But he has had a couple of big catches here and there. Heck, even Donut Boy, Golden Tate, has had a couple of good catches throughout the season. So the wide receivers probably are the most positive sign on the offensive unit, because everything else is very tight ends. Are not looking good, but then again, we're kind of using tight ends to block, not necessarily to catch balls. The offensive line is a wreck. I mean, James Carpenter is already looking like a bust. Russell Okung got off to a slow start because he got hurt in the preseason. The bottom line is this team, that offensive line is very streaky, and for the most part cannot create holes for the running game. Granted, I'm not a big fan of Marshawn Lynch. I'm not saying I don't like him. I'm just saying I'm not a big fan of him. But I got to give him credit, the benefit of the doubt, because the offensive line has been so poor. The Seahawks have given up at one point, and I don't know if the stat is still true, but at one point they had given up the most sacks, and that tells me the offensive line isn't doing their job. It also tells me that Javaris Jackson is holding on to the ball too long, but ultimately, when I look at sacks, I look at offensive line. The offensive line is not doing their job, and because of that, the Seahawks are constantly going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and putting more pressure on the defense. Another thing about the running game, again, the reason why I got to give Marshawn Lynch the benefit of the doubt is the Seahawks just flat out don't run the ball. I know they went off against Dallas. They looked very good with the run. But going into the Browns game, the Seahawks were actually last in rushing. Not only that, they were actually last in rushing attempts. That's stat courtesy of ESPN.com. And it's kind of puzzling to me, because Pete Carroll has constantly said that he wants to focus on running the football and establishing a good running game. And he puts all these pieces together, and he says, this is what I'm going to do, and then he doesn't run the ball. Which kind of leads me to what I think of the team as a whole. That being said, the Seahawks, I know I haven't talked about the Seattle Mariners in a very long time. I haven't given my opinion about the Mariners because I do work for the team. But the Seahawks are kind of like the Seattle Mariners. Great defense. Great pitching, great defense, no offense. And that's pretty much what we have here. A good, solid core group of guys who can play on the defensive side of the ball, and an offense that just flat out is anemic. I mean, they at some point cannot. I mean, sometimes they look great, but for the most part, they stall. They stall all the time. I mean, we're lucky enough not to get a 3 and out on every single drive that we have, because at some times that's what it's been like, particularly against the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. And I also, to go into more, another thing about this is, I kind of feel Pete Carroll and General Manager John Schneider as it's going to be weird, because I'm going to relate this to fantasy sports, and I know this is going to be kind of a weak argument, but you know when you play a fantasy sports, like you have your draft, right? And you have a solid draft, like you love the draft, you love the players you get, and then it's time to compete against the other teams, and you get off to a slow start, and then you're like, oh, maybe putting together this team wasn't such a good idea. And then, of course, in fantasy, you can make the changes that you can't make in real life. I kind of feel that's what the Seattle Seahawks have done. They went with needs in the offseason, with the exception of the quarterback position, and they cut salary. They dumped Aaron Curry, and they kept saying, this is who we're going to be. We're going to be a team that runs the ball. We're going to be a team that has a good young offensive line, a strong defense, and not everything has panned out the way they've expected it to. So in some regards, I kind of feel like they're kind of trying to learn how to win with the team they currently have on the fly. Because if you look at it on paper, I actually was pretty optimistic this year. I said my expectations were 8-8, but the Seahawks, they didn't make a big splash in the offseason, but they went with needs. And all of the moves they've made, for the most part, have not panned out. And now they're stuck with this team and this core group of guys, and they don't know how to win. They don't know what to do because things haven't been working out. So, kind of feel like this, I guess you could say the Seahawks kind of had a bad fantasy football draft. I know that's kind of a weird comparison, but that's ultimately what it's looking like. Now we have the question of Pete Carroll and John Schneider. I know I praised Pete Carroll before, and honestly, in my opinion, if Pete Carroll got his team last year to play at their best potential when it ultimately mattered, when their backs were up against the wall and they had to win the last game of the regular season, and then they had to win in the playoffs to move on. And Pete Carroll was able to get his team to compete and win two pretty big football games in NFL history, in my opinion. This year, I just don't sense that. I do not sense. I mean, there have been some times where he said, Tavares Jackson looks good, and the entire Seahawks fan base is going, no, he did not. He did not look good at all. There have been some times where people have been questioning his play calling, which I really don't like to question play calling because I think every single football fan has their own way of calling a game and different ways of running a team. But, we just keep passing the ball. We just keep passing and passing and passing and passing the ball. The Dallas game was the first time in a really long time where the running game actually did something. So the play calling has been kind of a weird thing to watch as well. And particularly, the game that I went to the 2 preseason games and I went to the Atlanta game, and I'll get the videos up later on this season. But you're telling me that on 4th and 8, you're going to go for a 61-yard field goal? I mean, that's just one of the examples of how the play calling has been so iffy these last few games. But I have to. We'll see what happens. I mean, at this point, looking at the division, it looks like San Francisco's finally going to be able to get a division title. I'm not part of the NFL trash talking circle, but San Francisco, it's about bloody time. I mean, I'm sorry. You guys keep saying, we're going to win the NFC West, and for years you've only been able to put up a good half of the season. And the only reason why and you could probably, arguably, put up a good half of the season this year and stink the rest of the year because the division is so bad. But at least you'll be over 500. So it's about time. Congrats. Actually, I won't say congrats. Let me take that back. But right now, San Francisco's looking like they're going to win the division. And today, the Seahawks are still in second place with a 2-6 record. They're tied with Arizona, but they got the tiebreaker against the Cardinals. And it's going to be a long year. I mean, we got some tough teams. I got a poster up there, so excuse me. We got Baltimore this week. We got the Eagles. We got the Bears. We got 2 games against the Rams. I know they don't look good. But we got San Francisco at home. They're looking pretty good right now. The Redskins are very streaky, so it's going to be a long, interesting second half of the season. But as far as the playoffs, I mean, I hate to throw in the towel, but I really do. But going 8-8 this year, at least for my expectation, it's looking like that's not going to happen. So we'll see. Weirder things have happened in the NFL, but that's what I think about the Seattle Seahawks. If they are going to change this, they have to, pray that Tavares is going to throw the ball, or Charlie, or heck, even Josh Bortles. Who knows? The play calling's got to improve. They got to try and run the ball a little bit more, and that offensive line has to gel a little bit more. I mean, that's ultimately what Seahawks fans are going to be looking at. The offensive line. Because I think people have seen the defense. They're pretty happy with the defense. But that offensive line has to improve the second half of the year, or it's going to be a really interesting offseason. So let me know what you think. I know that I have a tendency to offend people when I talk about the Seahawks on here, but always open for conversation. So comment below, and thanks for watching. Coming up next week, unless something weird happens, we will get a recap of the Central Washington University football season. That actually makes the Seahawks look a little better than what they are. But that will come up next week, unless something bizarre happens. So check out that, and thanks for watching. Comment below. Talk to you all later.